The stars had always been quiet. For thousands of years, humans looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They sent radio signals into the darkness. They built telescopes and searched for signs of life. They dreamed of meeting beings from other worlds. They should have been more careful about what they wished for. The Dominion had ruled 17 star systems for over 3,000 years. They were tall creatures, standing nearly 3 meters high with skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were black and cold like the empty space between stars. They had never lost a war. They had never needed to. When the fleet appeared in a new system, species simply surrendered. Fighting was pointless. Everyone knew this. Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Subjugation. He watched the blue and green planet growing larger on his viewing screen. Earth, such a small world, such a weak species living on it. His scouts had studied human radio signals for decades. They knew about human history, their wars, their divisions, found it amusing. These creatures could not even stop fighting each other. How could they possibly resist the Dominion? "Begin the broadcast," ordered. His voice was deep and carried the weight of absolute confidence. The message went out on every frequency. Every radio, every television, every phone on Earth received the same transmission. The alien language was harsh and grinding, but the translation followed immediately. "People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Dominion. You will surrender all weapons. You will surrender all spacecraft. You will surrender all leaders. You have 72 hours. If you do not comply, your world will burn. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The message ended, smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. He had delivered this same ultimatum to 17 other worlds. All of them had surrendered within hours. Most had surrendered within minutes. Fear was the greatest weapon, and they had mastered it completely. On Earth, panic spread like fire. People ran through the streets. Governments held emergency meetings. Religious leaders called for prayer. Some people hid in bunkers. Others simply sat and waited for the end. But not everyone was afraid. Park had been the first to see them coming. He was a lieutenant commander in the United Earth Defense Force, stationed at the Lunar Monitoring Base. When his sensors detected 300 alien warships entering the solar system, his hands did not shake. His voice did not tremble. He simply picked up his communicator and sent the alert. "Contact confirmed. 300+ vessels, they are here." The message reached Fleet Admiral within 4 minutes. She was aboard the orbital station, the heart of Earth's space defense network, was 53 years old. She had streaks in her black hair and lines on her face from years of difficult decisions. 20 years ago, when humanity first discovered evidence of alien civilizations, she had been a young captain. She had spent every day since then preparing for this moment. She read the alien ultimatum without expression. Then she called her commanders together. The war room was filled with the best military minds on Earth. Captain was there, a large man with hands and calm eyes. He commanded humanity's first true warship capable of fighting in deep space. Han was there too, barely 30 years old but already famous for her brilliant tactical mind. She had written the defense plans they were about to use. "They have 300 ships," Admiral said. "We have 47. 47 that they know about," Han replied. A small smile crossed her face. For 20 years, humanity had been preparing in secret. When they discovered the existence of the Dominion, they knew what was coming. They had studied the alien conquerors from afar. They had learned their tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses, and they had built defenses that no one expected. The asteroid belt was full of hidden weapons, mining stations that were actually platforms, communication satellites that were actually missile batteries, cargo ships that carried enough firepower to destroy small moons. Everything looked innocent. Everything was deadly. "They expect us to surrender," Captain said. His voice was like gravel. "Every other species has surrendered." "Then they have never met humans," Admiral replied. Park, the fleet's chief communications officer, entered the room. She was young, with quick eyes and quicker fingers. She had been monitoring the alien transmissions. "Admiral, they are laughing at us," she reported. "Their commanders are making bets on how quickly we will surrender. They think this will be easy." Admiral nodded slowly. "Good, let them think that." The 72 hours began to count down. Around the world, humans watched the clock and waited. The fleet moved closer, taking their time. They were in no hurry. They had done this many times before. In secret, Admiral positioned her forces. Ships moved through the shadows of planets and moons. Weapons platforms powered up silently in the asteroid belt. Soldiers checked their equipment and said goodbye to their families. Everyone knew that many of them would not survive the coming battle. On the second day, the United Nations made their response. It was broadcast to the fleet and to every human on Earth. Admiral stood in front of the camera. Her uniform was crisp and perfect. Her eyes were steady. "To the Dominion," she said, "we have received your ultimatum, we have considered your demands, and we have decided to give you a different answer." She paused. Behind her, the blue curve of Earth filled the window. "You have conquered 17 worlds. You believe you know what species do when faced with your power. You expect fear. You expect surrender. You expect us to kneel." Her voice grew harder. "You are wrong. We are humans. We have fought each other for 10,000 years. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. And we do not forgive those who threaten our home." She leaned closer to the camera. "You have 72 hours to leave our solar system. If you do not comply, you will learn why humanity has survived when so many other species have fallen. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. On the eternal subjugation, Supreme Commander stared at his screen in disbelief. For a long moment he could not speak. Then he began to laugh. "They threaten us," he said to his officers. "These insects threaten the Dominion." His laughter faded. His eyes grew cold. "Prepare all weapons. When the deadline passes, we will turn their world to ash. And we will make sure the galaxy remembers what happens to those who defy us." The clock continued to count down. Both sides prepared for war. And in the cold darkness of space, humanity waited for its chance to teach the true meaning of regret. The 72 hours ended at midnight Earth time. Supreme Commander gave the order to advance. 300 warships moved toward the small blue planet, their weapons charged and ready. The alien crews were relaxed and confident. Some of them were still laughing about the human response to their ultimatum. These primitives actually thought they could fight back. It was almost cute. Watched from his command throne as Earth grew larger on his screen, he had already planned the bombardment. First, he would destroy the major cities. Then he would land troops to round up the survivors. The healthy ones would become slaves. The rest would be disposed of. It was the same process the Dominion had used for 3,000 years. Simple and effective. "Supreme Commander," one of his officers said, "we are passing through the asteroid belt." Nodded without interest. Asteroids were rocks, nothing more. He was wrong. Lee sat in the weapons control room of Mining Station 7. He was a tactical officer, officially assigned to oversee resource extraction. In reality, he had been waiting for this moment for 5 years. His finger hovered over a red button. "All stations report ready," a voice said through his earpiece. It was Admiral speaking from the "Fire on my command." Watched his targeting screen. The ships moved in perfect formation, completely unaware of the danger. They passed right through the center of the asteroid belt, exactly as Han had predicted. "Fire," Admiral said. "Press the button." Across the asteroid belt, 47 hidden weapons platforms activated at the same moment. What looked like mining equipment revealed its true purpose. Fired massive metal projectiles at incredible speeds. Missile batteries launched hundreds of warheads. The empty space around the fleet suddenly came alive with death. The first volley hit before the aliens could react. 43 ships exploded in the opening seconds. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not solid metal traveling at a fraction of light speed. The projectiles punched through their hulls like needles through cloth. Ships that had conquered entire worlds broke apart and burned. On the eternal subjugation, alarms screamed, gripped his throne as the ship shook from a near miss. He stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 43 ships gone in seconds. It was impossible. No one had ever done this to the Dominion. "Return fire," he roared. "Destroy those platforms." The fleet responded, but they were confused and angry. They had expected easy prey, not an ambush. Their weapons lashed out at the asteroid belt, destroying several platforms, but the damage was already done. And worse, the human fleet was moving. Captain led the attack from the bridge of the... His ship was smaller than the cruisers, but it was fast and maneuverable. He had trained his crew for years, pushing them harder than anyone thought possible. Now that training would be tested. "All ships follow my lead," he commanded. "We hit them fast and we hit them hard. Do not give them time to think." The human fleet dove into the confused formation. They moved in ways the aliens had never seen before. Human pilots flew their ships like extensions of their own bodies, taking risks that seemed insane. They darted between enemy vessels, using the larger ships as shields against each other. They tried to respond, but their tactics were old and predictable. They had not fought a real battle in centuries. They moved in rigid formations, following standard procedures that every human officer had studied and memorized. Humanity knew exactly what they would do before they did it. Park flew a fighter alongside the main fleet. His small ship was fast and hard to hit. He watched a cruiser turn toward preparing to fire its main weapon. "Captain, you have one on your tail," he reported. "I see him," replied. "Keep him busy." Pushed his ship forward, flying directly at the massive cruiser. It was like a fly attacking a bear, but the fly had teeth. He fired his missiles at the cruiser's weapon arrays, forcing it to raise shields on that side. The distraction gave the seconds he needed. The spun and fired its main. The shot hit the cruiser's engine section. The alien ship lost power and began to drift. Moments later, 3 more human ships finished it off. Park monitored enemy communications from what she heard surprised her. They were not angry anymore, they were afraid. "Admiral," she reported, "their captains are requesting permission to retreat. Their supreme commander is denying all requests." Admiral studied the battle on her tactical display. The plan was working better than she had hoped. They were stronger, but they had forgotten how to adapt. They kept trying the same tactics, and human ships kept destroying them. "Continue the pressure," she ordered. "Do not let them recover." The battle lasted for 6 hours. Human ships swarmed around the fleet like wolves around wounded prey. Every time the aliens tried to form a defensive line, human pilots found a gap. Every time they tried to concentrate their fire, human ships scattered and attacked from new angles. By the end, they had lost 98 ships. Their proud fleet was reduced and bleeding. The humans had lost 12 ships and many brave souls, but they had won the first battle. Supreme Commander sat alone on his bridge. Around him, officers worked frantically to repair damage and reorganize their forces. He stared at nothing, trying to understand what had happened. For 3,000 years, the Dominion had been invincible. They had conquered every species they encountered. No one had ever fought back like this. No one had ever made them bleed. "What are these creatures?" he whispered to himself. One of his officers approached carefully. "Supreme Commander, what are your orders?" Was silent for a long moment. Then he straightened in his throne. His pride would not let him accept defeat, not to these primitives. "We retreat to Jupiter's moons," he said. "We repair our ships and call for reinforcements, and then we return and destroy every living thing on that planet." The fleet limped away from the battlefield. Behind them, human ships held their positions, watching and waiting. They had won the first round, but they knew the war was far from over. The Admiral allowed herself a small smile. It faded quickly. She knew what was coming. The Dominion would send more ships, many more. Today's victory was just the beginning. "Recover our wounded," she ordered. "Repair what we can and prepare for the next attack." She looked out at the stars, at the retreating enemy fleet. "They learned something today," she said quietly. "They learned that humans fight back. Now we must teach them the rest of the lesson." In the distance, Earth hung in space, blue and beautiful and still free. Its people had heard about the victory. For the first time in days, they had hope. The war for humanity's survival had begun, and humanity was winning. The fleet hid in the shadow of Jupiter's moons. 200 ships remained, many of them damaged. Supreme Commander paced his bridge like a caged animal. He had sent a message to the Dominion Council, reporting the situation and requesting reinforcements. Their response came quickly. The Council laughed at him. "You have 200 warships," the message said. "You face primitives who barely discovered space travel. We will not waste resources on your incompetence. Finish the mission." Read the message 3 times. His claws dug into the metal console until it bent. The Council did not understand. They had not seen what human ships could do. They had not watched their proud warriors die by the dozens against creatures half their size. But he could not argue with the Council. To fail here would end his career. To ask again for help would end his life. He had no choice but to continue. "Repair all ships," he ordered. "We attack again in 3 days." Meanwhile, Hand presented her analysis to the War Council. She had spent every moment since the battle studying the enemy. She had analyzed their ship designs, their weapon systems, their communication patterns. Now she understood them. "They are strong," she explained, showing images on the tactical display. "Their ships are larger and better armored. Their weapons are more powerful, but they have a critical weakness." She changed the display to show alien crew movements during the battle. "They are completely dependent on their commanders. Individual soldiers show no ability to think for themselves. When we killed their ship captains, the crews fell into chaos. They waited for orders that never came instead of acting." Captain leaned forward. "So we target their leaders." "Yes," agreed. "And there is more. They have never fought a real war. Their tactics are from textbooks written centuries ago. They do not adapt. They do not improvise. They have forgotten how." Admiral nodded slowly. "And we remember." Humanity had spent 10,000 years fighting each other. Every generation invented new ways to kill. Every war forced new adaptations. It was a terrible history, but it had made humans into something dangerous, something they had never faced before. "We need more information about their ships," continued. "Their internal layouts, their weak points, their technology. For that, we need to capture a vessel intact." That was how Operation Steel Fist was born. Sargent was 34 years old. She had grown up in a military family, served in ground forces for a decade, and transferred to Space Marines when the program began. She was not tall, but she was strong and fast and completely without fear. When volunteers were requested for the first boarding action against an alien ship, she was the first to raise her hand. Her team consisted of 40 Marines in heavy combat armor. They trained for 2 days on a mock-up of a cruiser built from data gathered during the battle. They memorized corridors and compartments. They practiced breaching techniques against doors designed for beings twice their size. On the 3rd day, they launched. A damaged cruiser drifted near the edge of the battle zone. Its engines were offline, but life signs showed the crew was still alive. Perfect target. Shuttle approached silently, using the debris field as cover. They attached to the cruiser's hull and cut through with plasma torches. The hole opened into a dark corridor filled with strange air that smelled like copper and acid. "Helmets sealed," ordered. "Move in pairs, kill anything that fights back." They moved through the ship like ghosts. The corridors were huge, built for bodies. The Marines felt like children in a giant's house, but children with very large guns. The first contact came at a junction. 3 warriors stood guard, carrying weapons that looked like oversized rifles. They were massive, towering over the humans, their skin like stone. They saw the Marines and raised their weapons. They were too slow. Fired 3 shots. Her rifle used armor-piercing rounds designed to punch through skin. 2 of the aliens dropped. The 3rd stumbled back, wounded, and Private finished it with a knife to the throat. "Keep moving," said. The battle through the ship lasted 6 hours. They were stronger and had better weapons, but the Marines had trained for this. They used the ship's size against the aliens, hiding in spaces too small for bodies. They set traps around corners. They attacked from directions the aliens did not expect. When an officer appeared, the Marines concentrated fire on it immediately. Just as had predicted, the regular soldiers fell apart without leadership. They froze, they ran, they made mistakes. By the 6th hour, the ship was secure. 23 Marines had fallen, but the mission was complete. Stood on the bridge, surrounded by dead aliens and sparking equipment. She touched her communicator. "Admiral, this is Steel Fist. The ship is ours." The cruiser was towed back to Earth's orbital shipyard. Teams of scientists and engineers swarmed over it, learning everything they could. They discovered how shields worked. They found weaknesses in the hull design. They downloaded computer records that revealed fleet movements and communication codes. The information changed everything. Captain commanded the carrier. His ship carried 200 drone fighters, small unmanned craft loaded with explosives. Originally, these drones were meant for reconnaissance. Now they had a new purpose. Using the captured data, had identified the exact frequencies of targeting systems. The drones were too small and too fast for those systems to track properly. They could get close before the aliens could react. When the fleet finally moved to attack again, they flew into a swarm. 300 drones descended on the enemy formation. Each one carried enough explosives to cripple a warship. The guns fired wildly, trying to hit targets that moved like angry insects. For every drone they destroyed, 5 more got through. The flagship took 17 direct hits. Fire spread through its corridors, barely escaped to a secondary vessel as his command ship broke apart behind him. By the time the drone attack ended, another 40 ships were damaged or destroyed. The aliens retreated again, their fleet shrinking every day. Sat in his new quarters, staring at reports he did not want to read. He had started with 300 ships. Now he had fewer than 160, and the humans kept coming up with new tricks, new weapons, new tactics. He finally understood what he was fighting. Not a primitive species, not easy prey. He was fighting predators, creatures who had evolved through constant warfare, creatures who treated battle not as a duty but as an art. He sent a new message to the Dominion Council. This time he did not request reinforcements, he demanded them. "Send everything," he wrote. "These creatures are more dangerous than any enemy we have ever faced. If we do not crush them now, they will become a threat to the entire Dominion. I am not exaggerating. I am not making excuses. I am warning you. Send everything or we will all regret it." The Council received his message. This time they did not laugh. The recordings from his battles had reached them. They had seen the human ships dancing through their formations. They had seen warriors falling to creatures that should have been slaves. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Dominion felt something they had almost forgotten. They felt afraid. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A primitive species from an unremarkable star system was defeating the Dominion. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a joke, but the evidence was undeniable. Recordings of the battles reached every corner of known space. Other species watched in amazement as human ships danced through formations. They saw the proud conquerors running away. They saw the impossible becoming real. On 17 conquered worlds, people began to whisper. For centuries, they had lived under rule. They had been told resistance was futile. They had believed it. Now they saw that it was a lie. The Dominion Council met in emergency session. Supreme Commander's warning had finally reached them. The recordings showed everything: the ambush in the asteroid belt, the boarding action, the drone attacks. The Council members watched in silence, their cold faces growing colder. "These humans are dangerous," said High Counselor. She was old even by standards, with silver patterns on her skin that marked centuries of service. "They must be destroyed completely. No survivors, no mercy." The Council agreed. They authorized the deployment of the Grand Fleet. 1,000 warships, the largest force the Dominion had assembled in 500 years. Every available vessel was called back from patrol duty and garrison assignments. The message was clear: they would not be humiliated by primitives. Supreme Admiral took personal command. She was the most decorated officer in Dominion history. She had crushed rebellions and conquered systems when was still a child. She would not fail. Earth had 6 weeks before the Grand Fleet arrived. Admiral called an emergency meeting of all military and scientific leaders. The situation was grim. Humanity had won every battle so far, but they had paid a price. Their fleet was down to 31 operational ships. Their weapons platforms were mostly destroyed, and now they faced an enemy fleet 30 times larger than their own. "We cannot win a direct battle," admitted. "We need something else, something they have never seen before." Doctor stepped forward. She was a physicist, not a soldier, with messy hair and tired eyes. She had been working without sleep for weeks on a theoretical project. Now that project might be humanity's only hope. "I have something," she said, "but it is not finished, and it is extremely dangerous." She showed them her designs, a weapon based on gravitational manipulation. It would create a tiny black hole, a point of gravity so strong that it would tear apart anything nearby. The effect would last only seconds before the singularity collapsed, but in those seconds it could destroy dozens of ships. "The problem," continued, "is delivery. The device must be activated at the center of the enemy fleet, and whoever activates it will not survive." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. "I volunteer," said a voice from the back. Everyone turned. Private Shin stood near the door. She was 19 years old, barely out of training. Her face was young, but her eyes were steady. "I am a pilot," she said. "I can fly a shuttle through their formation. I can deliver the weapon." Admiral looked at her for a long moment. "You understand that there is no coming back?" Nodded. "I understand, but my family is on Earth. My friends are on Earth. If this weapon can save them, then my life is a small price. Other officers protested. They tried to argue for unmanned delivery, for alternative methods. But the calculations were clear. A piloted shuttle had the best chance of reaching the target. A human pilot could adapt to changing conditions in ways a drone could not. In the end, Admiral accepted the volunteer. The 6 weeks passed quickly. Doctor and her team worked constantly, finishing the weapon and installing it in a modified shuttle. Trained every day, running simulations of the approach until she could fly it blind. Around Earth, defenses were rebuilt and strengthened. Every ship that could be repaired was repaired. Every weapon that could be built was built. Humanity knew this would be their final stand. On the day the Grand Fleet arrived, 1,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. They blotted out the stars. They were beautiful and terrible, a force that had conquered half a galaxy. Supreme Admiral looked at Earth on her display. Such a small world, such a stubborn species. All ships advance, she ordered. No mercy, no prisoners, destroy everything. The Grand Fleet moved forward in perfect formation. They had learned from mistakes. They kept their ships close together, protecting each other. They watched for ambushes. They were careful and professional. But they were not careful enough. Admiral had positioned her fleet behind Luna, using the moon's mass as a shield. They would have to come close to destroy them, and close was where needed them. All ships hold position, ordered. Let them come to us. They advanced slowly, expecting traps. Their sensors scanned constantly. They destroyed several weapon platforms hidden in the asteroid belt. They thought they were being smart. Captain launched his drones again, targeting the fleet's edges. They were ready this time and destroyed most of them, but the attack forced them to tighten their formation even more. Exactly as planned. The main force pushed toward Luna, 300 ships in the forward wave, with the rest following close behind. Supreme Admiral watched from her flagship at the center of the fleet. They are hiding, she said with contempt. They know they cannot win. Today we end this. Her sensors showed a small shuttle leaving the human formation. Just one tiny craft flying toward the fleet. Destroy it, ordered casually. Weapons turned toward the shuttle. Beams of energy lashed through space. But the shuttle was small and fast, dodging through the fire with skill that seemed impossible. Inside the shuttle flew with perfect focus. She had trained for this. She had dreamed of this. Every movement was automatic, every decision instant. Captain saw her on his sensors. He knew what she was carrying. He knew what she was about to do. Cover her, he ordered his fleet. Give her every second we can. They accelerated toward the enemy formation, drawing fire away from. Other human ships followed. They knew the cost. They paid it anyway. His carrier took hit after hit. Shields failed, hull breached, fire spread through the lower decks. All hands abandon ship, he ordered. He stayed at his post, continuing to draw enemy fire as his crew escaped. The died around him, but it had done its job. The shuttle reached the center of the fleet. For Earth, she said. She activated the device. For one terrible moment, a new star was born in the middle of the Grand Fleet. The gravitational weapon created a singularity that pulled everything toward it. Ships that had conquered worlds crumpled like paper. 173 vessels were torn apart in seconds. Supreme Admiral's flagship twisted and collapsed. She had one moment to understand that she had underestimated humans, one moment to feel regret. Then she was gone. The singularity faded. Shuttle was gone with it, but she had changed everything. The remaining ships fell into chaos. Their supreme commander was dead. Their formation was shattered. They had come to crush primitives, and instead they had witnessed something terrifying. Admiral gave the order. All ships attack, no retreat, no mercy. The human fleet surged forward, and the final battle for Earth began. The center of the fleet was gone. Where 173 warships had been, there was only debris and silence. Supreme Admiral was dead. The chain of command was broken, and the humans were attacking. Admiral watched the battle unfold from her remaining ships dove into the confused enemy formation like wolves among scattered sheep. They tried to regroup, but they had no leader. Different captains gave different orders. Some ships turned to fight. Others tried to retreat. Many simply drifted, their crews frozen with shock. Lieutenant Commander Park led a squadron of fighters through the gaps in the enemy lines. He had been there at the beginning, the first to detect the invasion. Now he would be there at the end. Target their engines, he ordered his pilots. Cripple them first, kill them second. His squadron moved with perfect coordination. They had trained together for years. They knew each other's movements without speaking. When one pilot turned, the others followed. When one fired, the others covered. A cruiser tried to bring its weapons to bear on them, too slow. Fighters were already past, their missiles slamming into the cruiser's engine section. The massive ship went dark and began to drift. Sargent was on her fourth boarding action of the war. Her Marine team breached another disabled vessel, fighting through corridors filled with desperate aliens. They were dangerous when cornered, but they were no longer fighting to conquer. They were fighting to survive. It was not enough. Moved through the ship like a ghost. Her rifle never stopped firing. Her team followed close behind, covering every angle. When they reached the bridge, the captain tried to surrender. Too late, said. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. They could not spare forces to guard prisoners, not now, not in the middle of battle. The ship was secured in 2 hours. Another vessel added to the growing list of captures. Park monitored enemy communications from what she heard was chaos. Captains screamed at each other, blaming one another for the disaster. Some demanded retreat. Others insisted on fighting to the death. A few simply went silent, their crews abandoning ship. Admiral reported, several enemy vessels are signaling surrender. Paused, the rules of war said she should accept. But these were not human rules, and this was not a normal war. Tell them to power down all weapons and hold position, she ordered. We will deal with them after. The battle raged for hours. Human ships were outnumbered but not outmatched. Every captain, every pilot, every crew member fought like they were defending their own family, because they were. Captain pushed into the thickest fighting. His ship had taken severe damage, but its crew refused to abandon it. They patched holes with emergency foam. They bypassed damaged systems with wire and prayer. They kept fighting. Captain, we are losing port shields, an officer reported. Then turn starboard, replied. Make them work for every shot. The destroyed 12 enemy ships before its weapons finally failed. Even then, used his ship as a battering ram, crashing into a destroyer and taking it out of the fight. Hen coordinated the battle from the war room, tracking every ship and every engagement. She saw patterns that others missed. She directed forces to weak points. She turned chaos into strategy. Fighter Wing 3, break left. There is a gap forming at coordinates 774. Cruiser Group 2, concentrate fire on the battleship trying to rally their forces. Do not let them organize. Her orders flowed through the fleet, guiding them like a conductor guides an orchestra. It did not happen all at once. First, the damaged ships stopped fighting and tried to flee. Then the support vessels followed. Then even the warships began to turn away. The Grand Fleet, the pride of the Dominion, scattered and ran. By the time the sun rose over Earth, only 200 ships remained capable of faster-than-light travel. They fled in all directions, carrying tales of horror back to the galaxy. Admiral ordered her forces to hold position. They had won, but the cost was severe. Half of humanity's remaining fleet was destroyed or crippled. Thousands of soldiers had died. Captain and private were gone forever. But Earth was free. 6 months later, everything had changed. The Dominion collapsed. The 17 conquered systems declared independence. Civil war erupted among the remaining as different factions blamed each other for the defeat. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for 3,000 years fell apart in weeks. Delegations from 12 alien civilizations came to Earth. Some came to offer alliances. Some came to trade. Some came simply to see the species that had done the impossible. Admiral stood before the United Nations, addressing humanity and the galaxy. Her uniform was crisp and covered with medals. Her hair was more than before, but her eyes still held the same fire. They came to conquer, she said. They believed we would surrender like every other species. They were wrong. She looked at the camera, knowing billions were watching. Humanity does not kneel. We do not give up. We do not forget. And we do not forgive those who threaten our home. They learned this lesson at a terrible cost. Let the galaxy remember it. In the audience, Han sat with the new rank of fleet commander on her collar. She was already planning humanity's expansion into space. The universe had shown that it was dangerous. Humanity would answer that danger by becoming stronger. Sargent trained the next generation of Marines. She pushed them harder than they thought possible. She told them stories of the war, of friends who had died so that others could live. She made sure they understood what it meant to fight for Earth. Doctor continued her research. The gravitational weapon had worked once. Now she was developing new technologies, better technologies, shields that could stop any attack, weapons that could crack planets. She told herself it was for defense. Deep down, she knew it might someday be used for more. Park was promoted to captain and given command of his own ship. He named it after the young private who had given her life to save them all. The galaxy had changed. Humanity was no longer alone, no longer unknown. They had shown the universe what they could do. Some species admired them, some feared them, a few hated them. It did not matter. Earth had faced extinction and survived. They had fought an empire and won. They had paid in blood and tears and sacrifice, but they had earned their place among the stars. On a memorial wall in Seoul, the names of the fallen were carved in stone. Captain, Private Shin, thousands of others who had given everything. Their sacrifice would never be forgotten. Admiral visited the wall every year. She stood before the names and remembered. She had sent many of them to their deaths. She carried that weight every day. But she also carried something else. Pride. These were her people. They had faced the impossible and refused to break. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would never be conquered, never be enslaved, never be destroyed. They had come to Earth expecting easy prey. They had found something else entirely. They had found a species born from struggle, forged in conflict, hardened by war against itself. They had found humans. And they had learned to regret it. The stars were no longer silent. They were filled with whispers about the small blue planet and its dangerous inhabitants. Some called humans heroes, some called them monsters, but everyone agreed on one thing. No one would ever threaten Earth again. Humanity had arrived, and the universe would never be the same.